Welcome to Cultural Entropy. This is going to be a book review for the 2001 Dennis Lehane crime novel, Mystic River. This is not going to be the movie. I am going to talk about the movie a little bit. In summary, this is about three childhood friends that suffer a tragedy. Well, I shouldn't say tragedy. It's more of a traumatic event. And then 13 years later, one of the characters' daughters is murdered. And then there is the investigation into the murder. One of the childhood friends, Sean, he's a police officer. The father, Jimmy, he's an ex-con, and then Dave is the schlub of the bunch, and how their story intertwines with each other towards the inevitable tragedy of the investigation. That's the non-spoiler review or summary of the novel. So my review of this, and again, I'm going to talk about the movie here in a second, is that I really enjoyed the book. Um, the first 40 pages were a lot better than the last 260. I'm not a big purple prose guy. I am more of a minimalist when I write or I read things. So sometimes, like Dennis Lehane's writing style should have turned me off. It didn't. It is very thick and very drippy, and I really enjoyed that first 140 pages. It got me into the world. It got me into the characters. It's not so much like the objective description of things. It was more the internal gut feeling of the world and the characters, their thoughts and their memories. I really enjoyed that. Right about 140, it starts bogging down a little bit with some of that character work instead of characters being a little bit more proactive towards what's going on in the story. It's a minor nitpick. And thinking about the movie a little bit, and it's been a long time since I watched the movie. I think the movie handled some of the mechanics better, and I think that would be the biggest difference overall. And then the second half, because I knew where the story was going, some of those mechanics were bothering me a little bit. But overall, really enjoyed the story. I actually had to slow it down and read it a little bit slower because of how thick some of that prose was. It was really nice. It was, again, that first 140 pages would be up there as some of the best that I've ever read before. So I would highly recommend it to someone that is into this kind of genre. Another kind of critique, and this is dated because this is 2001, and I'm super sensitive to authors injecting their politics. I would not go as far as say that like Lehane did inject his politics into the book. Remember, this is 2001. I would go as far as to say that now I know what his politics are, because something that I wouldn't have been aware of in 2001, I am hypersensitive to now. And that would be something that if you are hypersensitive, you're probably going to be aware of certain things as the story goes through itself. So anyway, moving on to the spoiler section, I want to talk about the mechanics of the book versus the mechanics of the story. So if you are not aware of what's going on, some of this may be out of its way, but one of the characters, Dave, he is the suspect in the murder of Jimmy's daughter. And the way the movie is able to portray this is because we don't have the internal thoughts and feelings of Dave in the movie. We are left to question Dave's guilt or innocence in the murder of Katie, the daughter of Jimmy. Now, in the novel, I thought okay, Lehane is not going to give us the internal monologue of Dave. And he did in the middle of the story. And since I'd already seen the movie and I knew where it was going, I thought that was cheating. Well, it's not. I thought it is cheating. Lehane does try and obfuscate why he's not going to tell us, the audience, what is going on with Dave. It doesn't work for me because I knew where it was going. It may not bother certain readers if they don't know where the story is going. That would be my biggest thing, is kind of where it was taking me out of certain points of the story, knowing that the author is, in on purpose, withholding that information that I would need to appropriately empathize or sympathize with the character, in this case, Dave. That was what would be one of the biggest mechanical problems, and it's something that in the movie does not take place. Now, I think, again, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie. I think there were certain changes to the movie that I think did help the actual subjective portion of the story, and their minor nitpicks in regards to plot and character. Overall, I think have the end of the story work a little bit better than what goes on. And again, because of how Lehane is so drippy, how much he does, deal with the internal monologues of the characters, their thoughts and their feelings. That is where like the story does bog down from a plot perspective. Really getting inside the mechanics of how the characters work, and I'm gonna use mechanics again. Really does help to identify all the characters separately. So there was a large investment for me in the story. It's also again what happens when you know me as a reader, when I read a chapter and I don't feel like anything has actually happened, because it is difficult to parse out those swirling feelings that a character has with actual progression in the story. So, at certain points, it's like, well, did this actually push anything forward? Did the character change? Did the world change? Did the plot change? And the answer to that is maybe. Um, Again, if a character is just generally spilling their feelings to the audience, something that they may have had before, but you know, we're not invested because of all the different points of view that the story has. The story jumps back and forth between multiple points of view characters, even within a chapter, and that's where it gets a little confusing for the audience, for me, to be able to look back and go like, I can understand the narrative flow that is going on between the world and the particular POV characters. And primarily there's two POV characters, but because we're not always in control of what those characters know or don't know, that's where it gets confusing. And that's where from the perspective of a writer, something that I'd like to do in my free time. And if you're into writing, Lehane is really good. This is not a knock on him as a from a skill being an artist. This is a knock as the objective mechanics of storytelling. In this case, if you're into that type of thing, I would definitely read this book because it shows the rule about why you should not be hiding information from an audience if you expect them to be in the POV of a character. POV ends up being very important in this case. So if I don't know if the character Dave is, the killer or not the killer, but I have to inhabit him, it will end up breaking my ability to connect with the character again, to align, as it's been pointed out before. The other thing that I would point out with some of the character work in the story is I am not going to go as far as to say that the characters betray how he sets them up, but there are certain choices that characters make that are difficult to understand for me as an individual. And this is less of an issue probably from a mechanical standpoint and more of an issue with like understanding or having your audience understand what your characters are going through so they can properly again align. I don't have to agree with what characters think and what they do, but I do need to understand it. And surprisingly, as much of this drippy character development that's going on where we inhabit characters like feelings and thoughts and memories, some of that I think was like underdeveloped towards what Lehane wanted at the end, in particular, the character of Sean having marital problems with his wife and dealing with her infidelity. Had a hard time understanding some of the choices that he was making in regards to his wife. I did feel it was a little emasculating for the character. It was just odd. Something that other people can deal with down the line if you ever read the book. But anyway, that was about it. I did really enjoy Mystic River as a novel. I would probably lean towards the movie because of those nitpick changes that were done. The book, though, is definitely something I would read because of the craft that is put into it. It is very good in that regard. And yeah, that's about it for my book review of Mystic River.